What's up, everyone? Welcome. We are live right now on YouTube. And if you're joining us in the podcast feeds like on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever it is, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great episode for you today. We are, like I said, live on YouTube, so we're going to be able to take live questions as they come in, but we do have a theme to this show. JR put together a list of topics and questions for us to talk about. We're going to be talking about germinating seeds and kind of everything around that. So if you are thinking about starting seeds for the outdoor season, maybe, or maybe you're going to do stuff indoors, either way, it's all good. We'll have advice on, both ends of the sides because I grow outdoors mostly. JR obviously is very seasoned on the indoor. But we're going to be getting on to that. And like I said, we'll also be able to take live questions from the YouTube chat. But before we get too far into it, I also, as always, need to give some shout outs. First off, shout out to everyone in the CannaBuzz community. It's our members only community for folks that want to support the CannaBuzz YouTube channel, support what we're doing, help send JR to festivals like the Dude Grows Cup. We're going to be able to help cover his flight to the Dude Grows Cup, Emerald Cup, things like that. This supporting the channel and supporting us through our CannaBuzz community is how we make those sorts of things happen. So if you want to be a part of that, join the CannaBuzz app. You can download the apps. We actually just updated the apps today, so you can download our brand new iOS or Android app and use the code BUZZ for your first month free. Also, shout out to lostcoastplanttherapy.com. If you need an IPM spray that's organic and can help knock down all sorts of things, they have a whole list on their website. Check out Lost Coast Plant Therapy. And please, thanks to Dirk for his support over at Lost Coast. And then last shout out from me goes to sacred3mushrooms.com. If you want to grow your own fungi at home, check out sacred3mushrooms.com. Sorry, sacred3mushrooms.com. And they have links to spores there as well. So if you need to grab spores, which can be tricky depending on the state that you're in and all that kind of stuff, they've got you covered. So kind of everything you need, go to sacred3mushrooms.com and use the code CannaBuzz for a discount code. And then JR, I'll give it over to you.
Thanks, Q. Yeah, and shout out to Tanazi over there at Sacred 3. He's always hooking up the community and trying to help people be successful at growing their own fungi and becoming independent in their way of obtaining medicine. But for our Tiki announcements, he has his Hyperchrome Panther runs, and it's a really one-off breeding project he did. There's only 300 packs available. It's the Y8 by Lemon Cherry Sherbet. Very limited edition, so hit up tikiseeds.com. And then for raw genetics, we are still trying to push that blue marker. It's permanent marker by Blue Slushies, and it's gonna be fire in there because I've grown the Blue Slushies now for about a year, and it's soaring high. I mean, it's very uplifting. So, and it's kind of funky or onion and kind of garlicky. So the two of those together, there's a lot of really cool potential in those packs. So hit up rawgenetics.io.
Awesome. Well, our last episode was funny. You got through your raw genetics thing, and then Joe was like, "Whoop-de-doo."
Whoop-de-doo, Joe.
That was hilarious. And I guess I get the sentiment, but at the same time, on that note around, genetics and stuff like that. So I've been buying Super Boof lately. It is, at least this claims, it's black cherry punch times Tropicana cookies. And if you were to
Whoop-de-doo, Q.
Yeah, if you were to ask me if I like cookies or whatever the fuck, I'd say no, or at least I don't care for it, or whatever. It's not my favorite. But at least with this Super Boof, I've been really enjoying it a lot. I love the taste of it. It comes through on the flower. When you get even pre-rolls of it, like from the dispensary, it tastes good. So I know I get the whole sentiment where he's coming from, I guess, but at the same time, there's still tasty stuff that's out there.
You could see my face kind of go. Thanks, Joe. Always appreciate it. But today we got some cool stuff. We'll be talking about some genetics in the way of seed germination. And I thought this is kind of a timely time because you might want to think about starting to crack some stuff and getting it ready, sexed, and ready for outdoor if that's your plan, or into the greenhouse if that's your plan. And there's always a good time to be cracking seeds indoors. So thought we'd go ahead and run down some of the whiz bangers of it all and kind of get through it. First, I wanted to talk about accessing genetics and seed viability. Um, Knowing your breeder and knowing the genetics that you're getting, I believe, is super important. And then once you get those genetics, the condition of them can sometimes vary. Sometimes things get rushed, or sometimes things don't work out as well as some of these breeders had hoped, or maybe they're just kind of fly by night kind of guys. And so what you're always looking for is kind of and classically we've always wanted that dark seed with the tiger stripes, shining, kind of full of hormones and ready to rock. Um, However, sometimes some of those greener seeds will be just as viable. But when you start getting into that yellowish, pale, kind of, yeah, or even like, you can just feel they're hollow inside. So,
Oh yeah.
there's nothing there is going to be viable. And there's a little dip test you can do. Usually, if you'll dump your pack of seeds into a cup of water, within a few hours, um, the ones that are viable will kind of sink to the bottom, and the ones that will float to the top are usually those that are not viable. I don't know if that's always the 100% um, you know truth on that, but typically that's what most people will do to kind of check the viability of their seeds, is kind of give it the sink or float test.
Nice. I think my power went out for a second. The
Oh, wild.
yeah, during the stream that was weird. My lights flickered and stuff. Um, but I think everything's okay. We've got this storm hitting the west coast right now. The only thing I want to throw in on that conversation real quick on the seeds is so I follow a lot of the conversations on like Reddit, and I'm in some groups on Facebook and stuff, and you'll see a lot of people that aren't as plugged in as probably a lot of the people that watch this show. They just Google, or they find some website or whatever that has like Granddaddy Purple seeds or whatever, and you have no freaking idea if that's the real Granddaddy Purple. And so I guess without going on too long about it, could you talk a bit why that's important to like know where it's coming from?
Yeah, because there are companies, especially companies outside of the states, who are notorious for just kind of ripping on people's genetics. Like, they might throw something purple together and call it Granddaddy Purple, and you're not getting anything close to that. Um, Also, something else I kind of think is a little disingenuous is when autoflowers will say, "Oh, this is OG Kush autoflower." Well, they may have taken OG in there somewhere in that breeding project to come up with that autoflower seed, but the expression you're going to get is not going to be anything like the OG cut that was used to produce that. So I think it's a little disingenuous in the naming on autoflowers, when they try to tell you that it's a known branded name as an autoflower, because like you said, to an uneducated consumer, they're thinking, oh, hey, I'm going to pop this. It's going to be auto, but it's going to be OG Kush. And it's not like that. That's not how genetics work. So I think that's a little bit disingenuous. And I think reputable breeders are easy to find if you really get out there and look. Instagram has a huge presence for those guys. X is kind of now popping off, but you can go and look at their breeding projects, because a lot of those guys will post, "Hey, this is this," and you can see year after year, what kind of work they're doing, and the kind of people they fuck with usually tells you by the crosses that they make. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like people like Brad or like Tiki, they have access to breeder cuts because they have community relationships with other breeders. And I'll shout out to the Lemon Hoku who we had on his Northwest 47 um, site on Discord. There's a ton of really good reputable breeders. Neptune at Neptune Seed Bank also has a lot of really good reputable breeders on there, and he has a lot of really good backstock of stuff from some of these guys. Sometimes even before they got super hot, and so there's some good stuff to be had in some of that. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Q, because accessing your genetics is very important because I mean it's genetics, lights, and environment. Those are kind of your top three that are
Yeah.
going to kind of push you towards a successful outcome. Then might be your nutrient style or medium style or whatever in that. But your genetics, I say number one, because if you have the greatest setup in the world and you have the ability to grow fire, but you bring in shitty genetics, no matter how good your shit is, it's still going to be shitty because it's shitty genetics. So I think that does play a huge part of it. And the next thing we could kind of move on to is kind of setting up those parameters. Because one thing we talk about in growing is each one of these stages, each one of these um, parts of becoming the final product that we desire, each one of those stages has these parameters of temperature, humidity, and light. And so for seed germination, you're really pushing for that 70 to 85. And people like that 76, 78 kind of range in popping their seeds. And then down the way here a little bit, we'll talk about three really solid techniques that people use for germinating seeds. But like I said, you always want to kind of stay within those optimal ranges for producing that. And the other part of that is the humidity part. They do want very high humidity, 70 to 90%. And in one of the techniques, we'll see that they're just literally soaking in water. Um, and how do you usually crack yours? Just curious, Q.
Yeah. Um so on this note, like in terms of like germinating the seeds, I've done it all. I've started it in a cup where you wait till the little tail comes out, or not even that. Like you soak it and then you maybe put it into a paper towel and wait for the tail to come out a bit, and then you prop it in some soil or blah blah blah. I've done that, and then I've also just started stuff straight in the soil. The only thing I'll mention on your last note about temperature and humidity, I guess, is one thing or a couple of things. One was going to be about in terms of the temperature. What a lot of the advice that we're going to go through today is what's optimal and going to set you up for success. Can you start seeds in colder temperatures or whatever it is? Yes. It's just not gonna grow as well or grow as fast, basically. Or you might have a higher failure rate, for
Yeah,
example. So it's
yeah,
just that's what you're risking. In terms of the humidity and temperature, also. When I've started stuff in soil, I've tried to start them in those it's like cardboard cup type things. They're not cardboard, but it's like the kind of biodegradable cup things that you could start plants or cuttings in and things like that. I've tried to use those, and I've had those kind of get mold on them when you're trying to be in this kind of mode of having a lot of moisture in this domed in space. I've had mold and other stuff kind of come up, and so I would just maybe start, if you're going to start in soil, maybe use something like a cup or something like that, like the solo cups that you've cut drainage holes in. I don't know if I'm jumping way ahead here in terms of how to actually start it, but I just wanted to get that pro tip there in terms of the humidity. I've noticed that when you're starting in soil, you kind of have to uh, you're having a balancing act there.
I just wanted to address someone. Not sure I'd mentioned in the chat that the temperature sometimes can determine whether it'll express itself male or female.
Huh.
I'm not really sure if that's possible. I think all that's predetermined whenever the seed is made from the
And the mommy and
uh
the daddy meet each.
mommy and the daddy. Um,
Yeah.
but I have heard of that, I have heard of that before, but I don't think that's quite possible. I will say though, speaking on that subject, if it is too cold, it will definitely slow or stall out your germination. And obviously if you've got low humidity, it'll just kind of be like a desiccant, it'll just dry it out, and
Yeah.
then you'll definitely get nothing out of it. Um, and the seeds definitely do prefer to germinate in the dark. However, unlike clones, seedlings, when they come out, they need good, adequate light. Otherwise, they're going to get super stretchy and really do weird stuff. And if you've ever, just started out and you've got these seeds and you've cracked them under, say, some, just cheesy CFL or something like that, you'll see that happen where they're just stretching out of control to get to the light. So, though the seeds themselves prefer darkness when they germinate, once they're germinated, they do prefer to have a decent amount of light, as opposed to clones where you don't need to hammer clones with a ton of light to get them to root and be ready to rock. Um,
Makes sense.
yeah. So, the next thing we kind of want to talk about is pH. Obviously, pH is relative not necessarily to the germination of the seed, but to the environment of that root or that tail once it does come out, especially if you're, doing direct sow into the ground or whatever. You'll want to make sure that your seed is in a pH 6.0, 6.5, kind of same range that you're kind of targeting in a soil feeding range if you're doing like a organic approach or something like that. Um, and a big deal also, when your seed is first cracking out, a lot of times that's when people like to introduce their fungi, their mycorrhizae, because that fungus will attach onto the root, and then it'll, as the root starts expanding and traveling out through the medium, that fungi will follow with it as it goes, and it'll keep doing it in exchanges in its delivery systems. And with fungi, you want to set up early as possible so that you can establish that relationship and then allow it to kind of go and grow with the roots themselves.
Are you
Um,
using like Azos or like a
you
recharge or something? What are you using?
Yeah, usually people will do a little soak and recharge.
Okay.
Um, um, Also, as soon as that seedling kind of hits that medium and it pops up, you want to start hitting it with a fungi immediately. And then if once you get rooted in your plug, your cup, or whatever, or your cube, or whatever, as you're transplanting out of that, you also want to hit that fungi early. And usually at that time, that's when you can use like a mycose or a great eye or whatever. That's going to give you that direct root contact at the time of transplanting. And then when you water in, it kind of activates that.
Um, so this next one we were going to talk about essentially you could kind of look at it as watering in a nutshell. We're going to talk about providing consistent moisture. You want to be careful about overwatering. Some pro tips that I'll share here, especially if you're, starting this in, I guess it'd be either way. So if you're starting in soil or if you're starting in those, I was gonna give the first pro tip was for those like spongy plug things. What are those called again? Like Jiffy
Oh,
plugs
the
or
rapid
no?
rooter type
Rapid
thing.
rooters, rapid rooters. So I've had issues with the rapid rooters where I'll have a rapid rooter and then I'll put that in like soil around it, right? So I'll put it in like a solo cup of soil. I've had issues where the rapid like the rapid rooter itself will dry out.
Yeah.
And so you have to be really on top of your game where like you could have the solo cup soaking. It could be really really wet, or at least with that soil in there, but for some reason the that plug is not really wicking up a lot of moisture into it, so you just have to be really careful and watch it because it will dry out, especially at the very top. And when you're starting the seed, you you could have an issue there where maybe like the bottom half of that plug is wet and the top half is dry, where you need, you kind of need this perfect little ecosystem there for the seed. So I would just be careful there. And same thing with starting it in soil, like in the Jiffy Cup, or sorry, the Jiffy Cup, the Solo Cup example again. You need to make sure that those are well drained. And I don't know if you have a pro tip for cutting holes in Solo Cups, because I've cut my hand.
Hmm.
I've really fucked up my hand with like last year when I was trying to slice some Solo Cups. So if you have a pro tip there, you can throw it out there. But you just make sure that your Solo Cups are draining. And if you have it kind of one nested in the other, make sure that you pour out the water from the other one, because I've had issues where you if you're not paying attention enough, you could have just this really wet soil that's gonna basically kill your seed. And it's not necessarily intuitive. You might think, if you've never done this before, you might think, oh, it's like maybe it's better to be too wet than too dry, or something like that. You can have a lot of issues if it's too wet. I've killed tons of seedlings that way too. So I guess the takeaway there is it's kind of this like Goldilocks zone of like it has to be just right, and you just have to stay on top of things, because those early days, especially when they're really little tiny and the little cotyledon leaves are just there, and it's gonna, maybe it hasn't even popped off the seed yet, like its little hat. It can die, in these first day or so just be really careful there. I'll stop from rambling, but I just wanted to share some thoughts there.
No, that's important because that this is one of the most delicate, volatile times in the process of growing cannabis, and seeds are not cheap. When you're paying $60 for 5 seeds or whatever, it's rough. And that's why sometimes, if you know anyone who's breeding, or if you know anyone who's pollen chucking or whatever, or just practice cracking seeds that are maybe not, $500 a pack.
Right. Well, when you buy seeds, you often get free seeds for whatever reason. And sometimes they're seeds that you actually want, and sometimes they're not, especially if you've ordered from some of the bigger seed banks, like a Seedsman or whatever the hell. They throw in all kinds of random crap. So those are the great seeds that you can fuck around with.
Yes,
Dabble with
exactly.
those, and then the you kind of get it down with those, and then when you have your more expensive stuff, you'll be ready.
Yeah, and don't get discouraged. I think a lot of people do get discouraged in that process because it can be hard. But yeah, that kind of like what I like to do is I'll water in the solo cup pretty heavy, not overly heavy, but pretty heavy, and then I'll plant into it, give it just a touch of water over that, and then just let it rock for like about 4 days, at least 5 days, because as it starts shooting that root down, um, if you overwater it, it's gonna not make it kind of seek for water. So it's not going to expand its roots as fast. If you're kind of riding that line, then it's gonna start dipping that tap root down there, and start expanding its root systems much, much faster.
Right.
And that's one thing that people do talk about, is not impeding your taproot, or try to avoid impeding your taproot as much as possible, because that kind of also can lead to stalling out to some degree as well.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
I'll mention on that note real quick before we get into You were going to talk about we didn't talk about leggy seedlings, but um, anyways, I was going to mention on this topic about impeding the taproot autoflowers. So yes, you
Yeah.
can start autoflower seeds in a solo cup and transplant it. I did it last year. Actually
Hmm.
transplanted it into outdoor containers. You can do it successfully. You just have to, it's not easy exactly. There's a lot of finesse to it. I basically like pre-cut the solo cup so that it was like easier to cut off the bottom, and then once it was ready, I just basically cut the last little part out from the bottom of that solo cup and then put it in the bigger pot, and it worked. But it's tricky because what can happen, for those that don't know, is if the autoflower taproot kind of hits the bottom of your pot or is disturbed too much, it will basically flip into like flower mode, and you'll have a tiny little plant.
Yeah. Yeah. And auto flowers are usually pretty small to begin with, so you don't really want to impede its growth in any way. And so now that you're looking at germination, typically your timeline, your time frame is usually between 5 to 10 days. If you start pushing past 10 days, that could mean a couple things. Seeds aren't viable. Maybe they're older, and a lot of the hormones that are built within the shell of it are not present. And so there are tips and tricks you can do to kind of bring older seeds to germinate. Some people will rough them a little bit with an emery board to kind of scratch that outer layer. Some people will soak them in, I think it's a gerbilic acid, which kind of helps. So there's some things you can soak them in, and there's some other techniques that you can do. And I know people who are cracking seeds that are, 20, 30 years old. I know Two Tone Willie got gifted a bunch of, I think it was, God, what is it? The White Widow. He got gifted a bunch of, Widow from the 80s.
That's cool.
And so he was able to get in there and get through some of those and get some of those hunted. And so there are techniques to bringing around older genetics. Typically within the 5 year window, you're pretty good. Um, Obviously, the fresher the seeds, the fresher the hormones, and typically the faster your germination rates are
Yeah,
going to be.
I'll jump in there because grown a I'm not obviously not a pro or anything like that, but I've grown a decent amount from seed over the last like 6 years, and I've noticed that like the ones that were rip raring ready to go, like your raw genetics or whatever, those might be popping out in 3 days. 3 days is usually the earliest I've had, because it takes um if without this is from just putting the seed directly in and not pre-soaking it, by the way. It's gonna take a few days, and those, like I said, are usually your freshest seeds, or maybe your really, just like kick-ass genetics. Your older seeds, or things that maybe not might not be as vigorous, or I don't know, just stuff that maybe is a little bit slower, might take 5 days or longer. Or maybe it's just an older seed, like I was saying, and so maybe it takes 5 days. But I've found that 3 to 5 days is my sweet spot. Once it starts to go longer than 5 days is when I'm worried that it's dead. And oftentimes it is. There are times where it's kind of popped up after 5 days, like you were saying, JR, but I've had issues where oftentimes the longer it takes, it's really just dead, or just something weird happened.
Yeah, or like you'll get one out of maybe the whole 10 pack to pop out of it, Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And so now I guess we could talk about a lot of the strategies nowadays is you might pick up a 6 pack of FEMs, and you might not have enough room to test, back up, and make sure you don't lose 6 females. So you might only do three of them, three of the 6 pack. And so one of the things you want to talk about is seed storage. Once you've kind of used the three, the three that you have left, you want to make sure those are in a cool, dark place. Try to make sure it's very dry, preferably an airtight container. You can use your refrigerator to keep them in. Some people will keep them in a freezer. I don't like to do that because I'm afraid of the auto thawing feature in a freezer. Because the one thing you kind of want to do is kind of keep it consistent. And so I find that keeping it in a nice dry shoebox uh, in the refrigerator seems to work really well. I haven't had any issues at all keeping them in the fridge.
Nice. Well, let's see. We were gonna get into germination techniques. Was that the next
Yeah,
topics?
yeah. And so I thought we would kind of start with, the old classic paper towel. Um, and basically, what you'll do is you'll get your paper towel, fold it into squares, and then you'll soak it to where it's like, what I do is I get it completely soaked and then I'll wring it out just a bit, just a bit to where I got water coming out. And then you'll put your seeds inside there in that paper towel. And I put it in a plastic bag, like a sandwich bag, a freezer bag, and then I label it so that way there's no mistakes on how it gets screwed up. And then a couple things you can do is some people put it on a plate with a plate over the top of it to keep it dark. I like to put it inside of a shoebox. And so what I'll do is I'll make sure the shoebox is blacked out. And then to keep it in that 70 to 83-ish range, what I do is I'll put that shoebox on a seed mat that has a thermostatic control. So I could dial the seed mat to 78 degrees, drop my shoebox on there, and it's just like the old days when you had a refrigerator that you could throw them up on. Back in the day when they had that radiator styled refrigerator, you could just kind of tuck them towards the back of the fridge and it was perfect every time. But that has since changed. And so as soon as that kind of went away, I started going towards the thermostatically controlled uh, seed mat. If it's not thermostatically controlled, you have to be careful because if the seed mat cranks up, it'll cook your seeds. Like you will cook them, like cook them.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's another issue I've had where I have it growing in a solo cup, and the soil is wet, and you feel it and it's hot, and I've basically like baked the seed. If you think about
Yep,
it, it's just like a hot wet mass that just like baked the seed.
I've done that.
No wonder it
Definitely
didn't
done
grow.
that. So kind of its strengths in this method, it allows you to easily monitor the seeds, and you can kind of consistently maintain that moisture and warmth that you're looking for. Um, and if you play the game right, it's pretty set it and forget it. You usually don't have to re-wet the towel or anything like that. Typically, uh, it'll be done like Q said. If you get your genetics fresh, sometimes 48 hours, bam, all the roots are out. You're like, holy shit, they're popped out of the seed. What the hell? And
Yeah,
other times it's like 5 days. So
yeah. And I'll say, like, I've had success with both methods, direct soil or the paper towel, or pre-soaking with water and then the paper towel or whatever. Um do you have a preference there? I was going to weigh in on my preference, but before I do, do you feel like you have more success than one or the other, like direct sow versus paper towel?
I like paper towel just because that's how I learned how to do it. And we had a green plants class my freshman year of high school, and that's how I swear to God, our science teacher was literally teaching us how to grow weed without teaching us how to grow weed. But yeah, so he taught us how to germinate seeds in a paper towel, and that's just kind of the method I've always been successful with. Um, so that's kind of how I like to rock it. But I know people do direct sow, and you've direct sow, and that's kind of the next little section we're in. So I'll let you talk about direct sowing.
Yeah. And my quick comment on like one versus the other. I guess I like paper towel because you get to see if the thing is viable or not. Where if you sow into the soil, it's basically just a long waiting game. Where if you are germinating in the paper towel first, it cuts out some of the mystery, right? Where after a while you're gonna see like this thing didn't sprout at all. Where in the soil you don't have X-ray vision or whatever, where you can just see
Right.
into your cup. So I'll just be waiting, and I'm just like hoping like maybe someday it'll come up, and then it never happens. And finally, after 2 weeks, I get the courage to like dig around in the soil, and I realize that it's dead, and it's probably been dead for a while. So anyways, that's just like what I've noticed, where maybe it could at least cut out some of the mystery, and I could more quickly see that the seed isn't viable, and I could have started another seed quicker. Because that's the other thing, like with timing, right? You might want to, for whatever reason, have everything kind of growing around at the same rate at the same time, and getting to know that that thing is dead and you can pop another seed more quickly could be really helpful, rather than waiting like 2 weeks to find out, oh shit, I need to pop another seed.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think that's really smart. Um, and when you're planting into if you're doing a direct sow, I just like to kind of go to the top of my pinky fingernail,
Yeah.
and drop that in. Um, the only time I direct sow usually is if I'm outdoors. If I'm doing something indoors, I usually don't direct sow. But that being said, you just kind of go down about a quarter of an inch, about the end of your fingernail. Cover it, lightly water it, make sure it's nice and moist. And then you're also kind of shooting for that optimal range of, 74 to 80 degrees, somewhere in there. Um, and
Yeah.
like I said, your light does matter. So make sure you have adequate lighting for the seedling as it comes up and starts doing its thing. And some of the advantages to direct sows, I would say, are it kind of mimics the natural germination conditions that it would find in nature. So it might start just come out the seed banging, tap root starts interacting with all of its community down there, and it just is off to the races kind of thing. So you may find that direct sow, once you get it to take off, man, it might take off a little bit quicker than trying to manipulate the taproot down in there and get it all right and then have it
Totally.
come up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you might.
Oops, sorry. I was gonna say, and on that note too, when you direct sow the seed, I can't get my hands upside down, but basically, envision my hand is the seed, right? Where the bottom of the seed, right here, like where my palms are, that's kind of the flatter end of the seed, and then it kind of goes and curves up into a point. You want to put the seed down into the soil, because basically what happens is the seed kind of hinges open at that flat point, and that's where like the taproot comes out, and that shoots down. Where if you have it the wrong way up, it's just kind of more work, and maybe it'll even f things up. So it's just save yourself the struggle or whatever, save yourself the trouble, and put the seed down in correctly, because if you're direct sowing, because that'll be really helpful. And that's, I guess, I was gonna think too, like on in terms of pluses or minuses. If you direct sow, there's less chance that you're gonna accidentally knock off the taproot, which can totally happen. So that's just depending on how like really careful you are. Maybe you're just like, hey, I just can't. That's too fine of a like motor skill, basically, or whatever, to like pick it up and put this little seedling with the tail. You got to be really really delicate. If you
You
can't
do.
do that for whatever like physical reasons or whatever, maybe the direct sow way is the way to go. And like everything that I just said earlier, that's just one side of things. You can direct sow and just have a lot of success there. So if you have these kind of optimal settings here in terms of temperature and humidity, and you're not overwatering and it's not like a soupy mess in there, you're gonna have success in that like 5 day ish range. Where after that 5 days, you're gonna probably wake up one morning and there's a seedling out there. And my son's crying in the background, so I'm gonna mute myself.
Yeah, well, Ben brought up a topic that was kind of on here too, is that it also minimizes your chance of stress, like just whoosh, any kind of stress that's happening in these processes all the way through can impede growth. It can actually change the way the plant expresses itself. All kinds of different things can happen in the more that you can minimize stress throughout its journey from beginning to end, the better off you're going to be for sure.
Right.
Absolutely. And also, like Q said, you also lessen your risk of damaging that fragile taproot as you're trying to finesse it into the right spot. And I'll kind of back up to that paper towel method. Some guys will hang the paper towel so that the taproot goes down and not J or up. I don't do that, and I probably should. But I like the paper towel thing, or I mean, I like the shoebox deal, so that's why I don't hang it. But there are folks that will hang it in the bag so that the taproot kind of stays straight.
That's interesting. Funny all the things that we do to manipulate
Yeah,
nature.
yeah. When, like you said, we could probably just put it in the ground, give it some water, and let it rip.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many different ways. All
Uh,
right, let's go. Let's see. What's this next one? Is plant sexing? Is that right?
Actually, we're going to do the last method of
Oh, okay.
germination, and that is to just soak in water. It's a pre-soak method, or just basically soaking until you see that taproot pop. And I know that some people even put a little bit of hydrogen peroxide in that water, shake it up really good with the seed in there, and then let that kind of do its thing. I'm not really experienced with the hydrogen peroxide method, and I really am not a soaker either. Like I said, I'm a paper towel guy. But I know, like Brad from Raw Genetics, that's how he does all of his cracking is soaking. He
S
soaks it, cracks it, and plants it.
Oh, okay. So they pre-soak it and then they go directly into soil from there.
Yeah, so you'll want like some kind of lukewarm, not freezing cold water, distilled water, preferably. And you'll let them soak 12 to 24 hours. Then pretty soon you'll see that kind of that tail crack. And at that time, you could put them in for like the Rockwell guys, they'll put them into their cubes at that time. Or you could put them into whatever your choice of. You could even go right into the paper towel at that point. But in my opinion, if you've already gotten to the crack part, you might as well get it into the ground.
Yeah, definitely makes sense.
So that's kind of the pre-soak or the soaking method. Um, and all of this stuff, if you really want to get good information on, I'm sure there's really, really detailed how to's on step by stepping how to do this for all these processes.
Yeah, we're just kind of also trying to share our little tips here and there. So this next topic, we're going to talk about plant sexing. So essentially, if you're not growing from feminized seed, which thankfully, feminized seeds are more and more popular these days, so they're more and more accessible. But sometimes you have a strain that it doesn't come in feminized, and so you're gonna have, it's kind of a crapshoot. You don't really know. Sometimes you get more males than females, or more females than males. It just whatever the luck of the draw is. It is what it is. But you know, eventually you're gonna want to figure out if what's a male and what's a female. So there's a couple different ways to do that. JR, you had this first one was the period manipulation. I haven't really messed with that too much. Do you want to talk about how you've done that, or how at least you
Yeah,
want to
that's
walk
this
through it?
is basically this is kind of how I do it. What I do is take that I'll take that genetic, that cultivar, let it come up. I'll grab a cut off that. I'll put that into the flower room, and as soon as I see it start to sex, then I know my backup, whichever my backup is, that'll tell me that that's male, female, and how to move accordingly. And so that's kind of that photo period manipulation, and it's not as stressful, um, obviously, because you're just keeping you're keeping a copy of it in veg, in its natural hormonal state. However, that takes space, and not everybody has the space to do that. Um, and so there's other methods also. But one thing I do, like I said, like about this is it does not put your plant through any kind of hormonal wackadoo while you're trying to get things figured out.
We've got a guy in chat, Genetic Memory Farms. He's saying that he just, or they, I should say, I don't know what they are. They plant, or sorry, sprout their seeds under 12-12 for two weeks, and then they flip it to veg lighting. Um, that's an interesting thing. I've never like messed with a seedling's hormones that early on to like basically sprout it under lighting schedule and then change it to veg. But they're saying that it works for them. So I can't speak to that, but that's just I thought I'd bring it up since they're talking about it
Yes.
in chat.
Yes, people will do that. So they'll go into like a 12-12 cycle for like 7 to 14 days to kind of trigger early flowering. And you don't have to do it right at a seedling stage. You could let it grow a couple weeks before you do this. You can flip it into a 12-12 for those, whatever days that it takes to express itself. And as soon as you see any sign of sex, you can then put it back into 18 and 6, and it will hormonally shift back into veg. And then you can take cuts accordingly, and you know what you have. Um, and that is also kind of like a little bit like the re-vegging technique, in that if you flowered something out that's super amazing and you didn't back it up, you could take, maybe leave a good third of the plant still on it and put it back into 18 and 6 veg cycle. And you can then monster crop it to where it will start shooting out clones that you can then take off. So it's kind of that same thing where you've induced it into a flower hormone cycle and then put it right back into veg. And I wonder, I'm sure they can speak to this, is if it is more beneficial to do it at a younger state rather than to let it get, 2-3 weeks into its life cycle before
Yeah,
you kind of do that.
they're saying do it at sprouting and there's no loss of growth or time. Just FYI. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that
Um,
is really cool. That's very cool.
yeah, that's super interesting. Um I'll talk about DNA testing because that's my favorite way. I was gonna share something. So I've been, I took these clones from my outdoor plants, and I've been running them indoor in a 3x3 tent on grow dots, and it's so interesting. Have you ever had a plant flower, even though lights are
Mhm,
a
mhm,
veg? Because
mhm.
what makes that happen? Is it just like hella root bound and it's just like fuck you, I'm flowering?
Not always. I mean, it can just be like it's got these auto flower tendencies, fast flowering tendencies, to where it'll start to show sexual traits even in veg. Um, Often it is some kind of stress that kind of induces it. but that's not always the case. I have seen it where it's just in 18 and 6, and the next thing you know, you go in like a couple days later and the shit's got balls, and you're just like, what the hell? How did this happen?
Yeah, it's I saved a couple Paradise Pine phenos, and one of them, the one that I really like, hasn't really flowered yet, but the other pheno, its sister, is fully on flowering, like despite my light schedule, so it's pretty crazy. So yeah, maybe that one I'm just gonna chuck and just keep the other one. But anyways, let's talk about we're gonna kind of coming into the tail end of the show, no pun intended. So let's talk about DNA testing. This is one of my favorite ways of sexing your seedlings because, why? Because it's quick and easy, basically. So, with our friend Farmer Freeman, which I think we have a code, right? CannaBuzz is the code? Or is it
Yep,
something else?
CannaBuzz get you
Okay.
10% off.
Yeah, so Google Farmer Freeman, or Farmer Freeman XY test if you want, and you'll land on his site and use the code CannaBuzz. And I love this thing. So basically, what you do is if you're starting from seed, you once the seedling is popped up and like I was talking about earlier, it pops off the seed. Those first set of the leaves are called cotyledon leaves, and then after a while you'll get the leaves that pop out that look like real leaves or true leaves, or they'll be those serrated edge leaves. I like to wait till those are out, maybe even another set are out, and then what you can do is you can take one of those cotyledon leaves and just snip it off, just break it, or even just break it off. And by that time, they're probably getting ready to fall off anyways, or whatever. But you can take one of those cotyledon leaves and you put it and use that as your sample that you send to Farmer Freeman. Now you can also just like I was talking about earlier, wait till those true leaves come in and maybe snip one of those. You could do that too. But I just, for what it's worth, I've had just as much success doing the cotyledon leaf thing where I just wait till I have those true leaves that are out. So everything's good. It's got its leaves. And then I'll break off one of those cotyledons and I'll send that to Farmer Freeman. And he's really fast, right? So you mail it to the DC area. And even for me, in the San Francisco Bay Area, he'll probably send me results within like 3 to 4 business days sometimes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
really quick.
Typically, it takes longer for it to get there than it does for him
Yeah,
to test it and give you your results.
exactly.
Um, and I've had incredible accuracy, and I've been using Farmer Freeman for God 5, 6 years now. And the thing that always plays out in my mind is the amount of light energy I'm saving, the amount of electricity I'm saving, the amount of food I'm
Exactly.
saving, space,
Mental energy,
time,
man, stress, all
you
of that.
know, all of that. So it gives you the ability to know really quickly what your strategies are going to be, because when you crack a 10 pack and you get 8 of them are all females, well, holy shit, your strategy is gonna definitely be different, you know? And so knowing right off the bat, what you're up against can really help you strategize how you wanna move forward, especially if maybe you're breeding and you're looking at doing some male selections in there, as well. You can isolate your males, treat them how you wanna treat them, get the ladies over here, treat them how you wanna treat them, and kind of give you good strategizing potential with that process. And like you said, his turnaround time's crazy. It's really crazy how
Yeah, you'll
quick it
basically,
is.
like last time I did it, and this was a little while ago, maybe a year and a half ago, when I was doing the Paradise Pines for the first time. You get an email when he gets your stuff, when he receives, like, your sample has been received or something like that. I think you get like an automated email, and then sometimes within that same day you'll get your results, or the next morning I'll get my results. So they are very, very fast over there. So you basically, you go on their website, you spend what, like 11-ish, maybe $14, there's a range there, per test. So you're spending under $15, under $20 per sex test, and you get your results basically as fast as the postal service can send the envelope to DC. You know, you'll get your results.
Sam is saying that there are home tests that you can do in 12 hours. I wonder how expensive they are, and how complicated it is, because that's kind of cool, to just be able to, sorry, Farmer Freeman, but I mean, really, if you could really set up and bang that out in your house in 12 hours, that's kind of cool. Like if it's just a little cut a leaf, put it in some solution, shake it up, and it
Yeah,
gives you a color
I'm
kind of
not sure
thing.
if he was saying, because Not Sure was saying they need to make these a at home test, and I don't know if Sam was like
Oh, home in 12
suggesting.
hours. I got,
Yeah, yeah,
gotcha.
but I don't know. Yeah, either way, that would be cool. Yeah, the basically the home pregnancy test for seeds.
The word, right? Gender testing.
Yeah.
Gender
Um,
testing for seeds.
we had a question earlier about tissue culturing. We haven't. I've never accessed it because tissue culture traditionally is something that's more expensive. We've had some good episodes on tissue culture though. If you want to
Yeah.
go into YouTube and search CannaBuzz tissue culture, we've got at least one episode where we talked to like an expert on tissue culturing. But we've also had other people on. I think we've done where Brad from Raw Genetics has talked about it. Various or
Mike,
Mike, yeah,
Super Seed Co.
yeah, Super Seco. That was one that we did last year. That would be a
Yeah,
great one to
and
pull up.
he's super knowledgeable. He's actually does a lot of consulting for other people who want to set up tissue culture setups. And shout out to Polly Two Fingers. He kind of started studying under Mike's method, and he had hemp russet mites move in on his garden, and he was able to tissue culture a lot of the stuff that he didn't that he didn't really ever want to lose, and was able to save some stuff. So um and I think the comment that Mike made when he came on is that, if you have the ability to do something in a sterile environment, like grow mushrooms or whatever, then you could tissue culture. So it's just a matter of probably some home setup flow hoods, some procedures, some tools. I'm sure you could probably manage to do it yourself. And I kind of thought that was interesting, because a lot of these guys, these big lab guys, when it was first kind of becoming a hot topic, they're like, "Oh yeah, there's no way people will ever be able. Breeders won't be able to do their own tissue culturing. It's too expensive to have lab technicians and all the setup and all this, that, and the other." And there's another girl on YouTube.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Um,
bring her up.
yeah, she does some. It's not necessarily cannabis specific, but she does a lot of interesting videos on how to home do some tissue culture setups. And I know
Her
there are
her
kits you can buy.
her username is Plants in Jars. So she's awesome. She's like an actual chemist or whatever, botanist or whatever. And so she actually knows what she's doing, and she has access to like professional equipment, but she does all this stuff at home, and she walks through it all with a bunch of different plants. She's like I think a full-time content creator at this point. So she's always putting up videos about how to do this stuff. Here's one: DIY tissue culture, how to get started for less than $200.
Yeah,
So there
there
you
you
go.
go. There you go. There you go. And I'm sure it's like everything else, there's probably a little bit of a learning curve to it, but I mean, if you're dedicated to the process, you'll figure it out. You'll get it. You'll get it.
Awesome. Well, that I think is the episode. Um, let's see. We have if anyone in chat has any more questions before we end the episode, we can kind of take some questions from chat. Um, we are planning to do an episode again next week. It'll be we'll do it live in CannaBuzz on Monday the 10th.
Monday.
We had it on Sunday, but I realized that it was right in the middle of the first half of the Super Bowl. So we're gonna punt it a day to the 10th. So we'll record that. Who's the guest on that episode?
That episode is a soil episode and it's Sixth Coast Soil. They kind of do a living soil bulk.
Okay,
So they kind of help larger farms. They also kind of tailor soils for different regions. So like
that's
one,
cool.
yeah, one on the West Coast will have a certain setup based on because all these regionalities, the way you access inputs are different, and
Right.
so to kind of tailor these for your regions, I think is kind of smart. So I'm curious to see how that goes.
Um, And then, yeah, Thomas Cooley he says, make sure y'all hit that like button. Yeah, thanks everyone who's watching on the live, and still watching. We still have, at least on my little thing on my stream, it says 74 folks that are watching live right now. Thanks to all of
Woo.
you that are watching. We really appreciate your support. Um, yeah, we're kind of back into the swing of things here in the new year, so we'll start booking more guests, and we'll do live streams as well. Probably some weeks if we can't book guests or whatever, we could always just do it live. Um, and what else was I going to talk about? Well, so you're looking at going to the Dude Grows Cup, and
Yes.
then and then the Emerald Cup is they haven't announced it yet, but it's going to be in
No.
like April or whatever, probably
That's
April or May.
if it's going to be April, they better hurry up and announce shit. People got to make plans.
I know, right? So, but when we had him on last year, wasn't he saying like May-ish? I think he was
That's what they
saying.
were hoping for.
Yeah,
But no word. I mean, it's just, dead air. So who knows?
yeah. Not
I
sure.
will
Said
say
is it
though,
in Oakland again? Yeah, it is.
speaking of the Dude Grows Cup, we will have the dude on here within the next few weeks, and they've got some special announcements this year. They're expanding things, so tune in, folks. Listen to the dude.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Looking forward to hearing that. Yeah, I've been kind of thinking a lot about a lot of different things lately, but one of them is about YouTube and and just the future of things. It's really interesting, actually. Just today, kind of being on topic, in YouTube's financial, or sorry, Google's like financial call, they actually mentioned something about how like YouTube's the home for podcasts. So I think they're really taking it seriously, just these longer form shows, which for the longest time, and I think frankly still to a certain matter, or to a certain extent, I think it penalizes our videos because they're long, and they're
Hmm.
not like
Hmm.
10 minutes long or 20 minutes
Ooh,
long or
wow,
whatever
wow.
yeah, and cut a bunch of different ways. So hopefully YouTube tweaks the algorithm to like treat long form videos like this better.
Well, I
But
thought it was an interesting statistic that they said that I think YouTube, I forgot what lion's share of the actual home viewing audience, like taking away from television,
oh yeah.
Netflix, all those guys, broadcast, Netflix, all of them. I know a lot of my friends, they just throw YouTube up on their big screen and that's what they watch every night.
Yeah, that's what we do too. Um so anyways, I was mentioning it about YouTube and kind of thinking about the future of shows like ours, and so I'm excited to hear what the Dude Grows guys are up to. Um but back onto what I was saying earlier, we'll plan to for you to be at the Dude Grows Cup. I don't know if I'll be able to make it just at the kid and everything. Um but at least JR will be there, and then we'll plan to be at the Emerald Cup, of course. And then, we'll see what else the year holds for us. But I'm excited to have some cool conversations. We've had some good conversations. The Cannabis Kim show is really cool. I'm sure we'll
Yeah,
have
she's
her
coming
back
back
again.
on.
Yeah.
She's coming back on. I sent her, or someone allegedly sent her some rub and some tiki rain, because I sent her the lab reports on the tiki rain because it's a very, very unique cultivar, and I thought that was something that maybe she could work with, and maybe dig into a little bit, just to find out why and how it works the way it works, being that it's the very low testing strain, 16%, I think, the flower. Very
Nice.
low testing, but its effects are crazy. Um, and Also, I want to talk topicals. So we kind of left off with her with terpenes and cannabinoids, but we need to get into the volatile sulfur compounds and the other compounds that they've discovered now that play a part into the whole entourage thing. So that's kind of be an episode. And then at some point, I'd like to get into topicals because um, like she said, I think it's one of the most underutilized ways to use cannabis.
Yeah, and we should bring on, who's it, Kyle from Future Compounds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we should.
reached out to the social media account, and I think the person who hit me back was not Kyle. Was must be
Well,
their
yeah.
person,
We'll
but
hopefully be
was
able to figure it
interested in
out.
coming. They were interested in coming on the show,
That'll
so
be cool.
I don't know. We'll see.
I mentioned them because I've been using this CBD CBG gummies. I used them
Oh,
on my trip when I had to go to like a work training thing where I had to like focus all day and in like a classroom type setting, and so this was really helpful to just keep me like focused and calm and like my calm my anxiety. So anyways, I'd be excited to talk to them again. Well, cool. Before we ramble too long, um we really appreciate everyone that's been supporting the show. If you have topics that you'd like us to talk about, or people that you'd like us to have on the show, let us know in the comments. You can leave a comment. JR looks at like all the comments. I look at all the comments. So I think by the way, what was it? Top Dog or whatever Seeds.
oh yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I gotta
so
get a hold of JJ.
we'll have to,
I don't know how to get a hold of him, but I
yeah,
want to get JJ on
yeah,
really bad.
yeah. Well,
Like I,
yeah, we'll figure that out. But they were up for it. At least we saw that come in on the on our most recent video, came in on the
right.
comments. So that was cool. So if you're watching and you think that we should have someone on, let us know. Leave a comment. It just It's great to have ideas. For folks that we should reach out to, or growers. Maybe there's like a grower in your state or whatever that's kicking ass and in a unique way and has something interesting to say. That would be cool too. To connect with people that are out there doing things. But yeah, let's end it pretty much there. Any last words or anything thoughts before we go, JR?
I want to get more merch out. Shop CannaBuzz or shop.cannabuzz.app. We have some older merchandise there. Um, I would like to
Oh yeah.
maybe see if we could get that thing going again. Because there's so much potential for so many new designs. I created a new design on a shirt. I'll try to wear it next episode.
Okay.
Just to give you guys a look. But yeah, I'd love to be able to get some more shirts out there for folks.
Alrighty. I'll have to.
So shop.cannabis.app and the hats too. Fire hats are fire.
Nice. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Thanks to our supporters in the CannaBuzz community, as well as all of our sponsors. You can check out their link in the description or the podcast notes. And as always, JR,
Growers
growers
love
love.
y'all.
Peace, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah.